The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another UAB Director's Chair. He is the man, the athletic director for the UAB Blazers, Mark Ingram on the left-hand side of the screen. I'm Tony Kurre, and of course we do this show every single week. You can hear it at least 5 times in the TKR app, thanks to the 100,000 folks who have downloaded that app. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, available anywhere, and of course right here on our Tony Kurre YouTube channel. Mark, what is going on, my man? I want people to know we talk for a few minutes before we actually do the show. We have pleasantries. You took care of my son and I this past week. Drove to Clemson, I guess, right after the show when we did it last week. And then got there around 5:30, hopped in the car, drove another 2.5 hours to the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, and saw the Asheville tournament. 2 fantastic games. And, of course, UAB did save some face a little bit, knocking off Maryland there on that Sunday. But thank you so much for everything you did for your UAB boy here. And, of course, my son absolutely loved it, and we were sitting right there on the bench and getting after it, but it was a fantastic weekend, and what a great tournament it really was.
Yeah, it really was, and we had that Clemson game. You know, we lost our first 2 basketball games, 2 points to Bradley in overtime and 1 point to Clemson. I mean, these are games that we absolutely could have won, and and then beating Maryland, who I think was preseason number 3 or 4 in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. That's a big win for our program, and I know that, again, we're not 3-0, but we easily could be 3-0, and it gives me a lot of really I'm excited about a great optimism of what this new team is going to be and what they're capable of. I mean, I'm going to tell you, man, being here in Bartow Arena, we played Bradley. We're down 16 points at the half. Mm-hmm. And not playing great. And we had been down, I think we had been down 20 at one point. So we're down 16 at the half. We come out of halftime, and the first 13 minutes of the second half was about as good a basketball as I've ever watched in my life. Yep. And I mean, it was awesome, awesome, and took an 11-point lead, in fact. So, ultimately they tied us, and in overtime they made a crazy shot, kind of a floater runner kind of thing over a defender to win that game with only 2 seconds left on the clock, 2.5 seconds. When they hit that shot. So, look, man, they made the shot and we could have, we had other opportunities, but I'm really optimistic about what that team's going to be.
No, it's going to be good. And I'm telling you right now, it's a fun basketball team to watch. They had Clemson down by 9 late in that game. And of course they hit the late 3 to go up 1 with about 9 seconds left. And I'm sitting there with my son, and those refs, I saw both games, were calling everything. And there were more boos than cheers there at the old Cherokee Harris Arena. And so I told my son, I said, if I don't hear a whistle within the next 9 seconds, I will be amazed. And sure enough, and I just hate when a basketball game is decided like that. I really do. Yeah. I know in the NBA, they're never going to call anything, and there's something to be said about that. But very, very exciting.
You need to be sure. That's really the deal. Is you need to be certain that it is a foul. If it's an obvious foul, you call it. Yeah, man. If it's just, don't call a reach-in touch foul that's inconsequential out on the perimeter where the guy's not trying to shoot. This sort of thing. Don't call a foul if you don't have to call a foul, because now you really have affected and impacted the result of the game especially in that moment. I don't get involved in officiating conversations much. The only thing that I really ever say to our league or any league that we've been in is no fan wants to watch this constant foul, now kids are fouling out. Now your best players are on the bench. Like, that's not. Well,
UAB lost their 2 big guys. Both guys fouled out with 8 minutes left.
Yeah, it's like that's you've impacted the game now. You've affected the result, the end result, and anyway, that's neither here nor there.
What kind of relationship? I always love. That's the part of the game I really, really enjoy. As I like to watch the coaches. I love to be able to hear. And thanks to you, we were sitting right behind the bench, so I got a chance to hear. I almost felt like I was sitting in the huddle. Well, what kind of relationship How many different refs are there in college basketball? I'm assuming there's thousands, but I mean, do coaches have relationships with them? I like to see what they say to each other. I know they give each other a pat on the backside, when they're walking away, and then 3 minutes later they're getting teed up. But I mean, what kind of relationship do coaches usually have with refs, and do they know these guys?
They do, and there's not thousands, but there are a lot of them, and Andy, being as experienced as he is, having been a head coach for a long time, he knows a lot of them. Andy, anybody listening that has met or spent time with Andy, Andy's got great sense of humor and friendly to them. And even in a night that he'd call a bad night or a loss, I'm with him. I watch him kind of interact with them. Hey, y'all be safe getting home. Good to see you, that kind of thing. And I think that goes a long way. And I asked him his first year with us, I had seen him sort of during the game almost cutting up with them. Mm-hmm. And like he said something and he laughed or they kind of smiled or something. Lord only knows what he said. I don't know what he said. But I asked him about it, and he goes, man, I learned a long time ago, they're not going to change their call. And he said, he goes, there's no sense in like berating them. Mm-hmm. It's not going to help. If anything, if they like you, then they're more inclined to be favorable or more lenient.
Absolutely.
When you hope that they will be. And he said, so that's my approach.
It's human nature. It's human nature. It's subjective. And if you like somebody, you're going to treat them nicer. I mean, it just is. Yeah. But to go along with that, and again, there wasn't a whole lot to be done at the end of that game because it was a myth foul. But I do think it's important that if they are wrong, and of course, now with instant replay, you're watching everything and they can see when they're wrong, that it's important to let them know that you notice that because there is a thing called makeup fouls. I've seen it a million times.
I think he does. I don't want to say I think he's easy on him. I just don't think that he takes the approach where, veins are bulging out of his head, screaming at him. If they make a bad call or a call he thinks is a bad call, he go, hey, man, you can see him talking to them. Mm-hmm. If we watch the game and watch Andy, when those officials come by him, he'll say something to him about it. He might even ask for clarification. You didn't think that was, and they'll, of course they'll shake their head no, but that's about as kind of ugly, if you will, that Andy's going to get.
I did see something kind of interesting, and I hope you don't mind me asking this. And again, I was right there behind the bench. Whenever there was a timeout, Gaines would sometimes sit by himself on the bench while the rest of the team was on the floor with the chair. Now, in most cases, he was not in the huddle if he wasn't going back in the game after the timeout. Was there a reason? And I had a lot of people around me asking questions. Is he okay? And I knew that he had some ice. He was icing the back of his hamstring down, and I figured that had something to do with it. Obviously, if he's got a few seconds to tie something down and he's not in the middle of the group. But any thoughts on that? I just thought that was really interesting because it happened more than once.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specific to Eric, but I mean, usually whoever when you have a timeout, whoever's going back out on the floor is who you're going to see seated around the coach. Yeah. And so that's number one. So if it's a situation where they've checked somebody in as part of the timeout, he's going to be on the perimeter anyway. If there's an injury, like you said, or kind of a nagging something, I need to get a stretch or something, they're going to do that they're going to take those opportunities to do that during that time. And then, man, every player is different on what they need to be ready. If they need just a minute alone to collect themselves, who knows what's just happened. They're frustrated with a call. They're frustrated with themselves. That's usually what it is. They're frustrated with themselves. Maybe a coach looks at them and says, Tony, why were you there? You know where you're supposed to be. And they know that, they're frustrated. They get taken out of the game. So everybody needs a minute, maybe to gather themselves. But if they're not going back in, that's usually the deal. You've been around a long time. You ever met Roy Williams? I have, yeah. Really yes, he was actually at the game, and obviously we were in North Carolina, and so that kind of made sense to me a little bit. But I kept thinking to myself, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. This is the first question I thought of. UAB Athletic Director Mark Ingram joins us here on the UAB Director's Chair. Why does Roy Williams go see basketball games?
I mean, he sat there for both games, sitting on the floor. I'm assuming he was sitting with his wife. And all I could think about, and I was talking to my son, I was like, do you think he's breaking down the plays? Is he just there purely to watch basketball? Obviously, he's been to a million basketball games, and I would think to myself, and I know he loves college basketball, but I'm thinking to myself, why would he be spending a Saturday night in a rainy Asheville town watching these two teams where he doesn't really have a dog in the fight? Could you kind of tell me what you think he was doing there? Just curious.
What I would tell you, what I think is that he's an advisor to that tournament along with Dave Odom, who I know was there.
Okay.
And they help organize it, help get the teams in it, and they also help with the Maui Classic. So this is an opportunity to get a trip to Maui. That'd be my guess. I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing.
Yeah,
I think that's about the trip to Asheville. No offense to the good folks at Asheville. It's a beautiful town. But my guess is he's advising on both of those events, and thus that turns into a free trip to Maui.
And that's why I asked. That's the man. All right, big weekend down at Protective, 2:00. Of course, not only the last home game of the year, it is going to be Senior Day. We're sending off 11 seniors, and of course, Salute to Service Saturday as well. Again, 2:00 on ESPN Plus. It's going to be Temple, and I wanted to mention one of those seniors, Jermaine Brown, who just became your all-purpose leader. He's going to pad those stats hopefully this weekend. Of course, I know that Jacob Zeno also set a completions record this past weekend against Navy. Before we get into that a little bit, I know you were there. You did the show from outside Philadelphia last week, and I know you had to be disappointed. And I saw the presser afterwards, and I was not pleasantly because they lost, but I was surprised that Trent Dilfer really wanted to stick to the run against Navy, knowing just how prolific that passing attack is for the UAB Blazers. When I saw the halftime score, I was like, they got 6 points. What's going on? This team could put up 40 in a blink. What were your overnight thoughts on that? And again, it was Veterans Day, so I'm thinking to myself, well, at least we lost to Navy, right?
Well, yeah, look, hats off to Navy, who had a great plan. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you watch, their defense was just swarming everything that we do usually with relatively good success. I mean, it looked like they had 13 guys on the field playing defense at times, and I don't want to make any excuse, and I don't think Trent would either. I think they outplayed us. I think they were prepared for the game. They had a great plan for us, and in a lot of ways, I just don't think that it just wasn't our day. They played they probably played the best game of their life, and we didn't play well. And in some sense, he said, I'm at a loss for what just happened, again, hats off to those guys who played a good football game, and he knew they were better than what people wanted to give them credit for. I think they had a bad game against Temple that they sort of, in some sense, would say, I don't know what happened at Temple, the week before. And so now here we have Temple, and you might, by the way, if you come to the game, you may also find yourself face to face with Hall of Famer Kurt Warner, because his son EJ is their starting quarterback and is really, really good. Temple, where I was before I came to UAB, is kind of known for toughness. Their players have always played tough. They've played very hard, very physically. It's kind of their, signature to their program is that they're very, very hard-nosed, tough. And Stan Drayton, their head coach, I've worked with Stan before. Stan was at Villanova, which is right there in Philly, about 5 miles from Temple, when they recruited Brian Westbrook, who played for the Eagles for a long time. So Stan was, I think, a great hire for Temple because he already knew the Philly area, and Stan's always been thought of as an outstanding coach and recruiter. And so I think it's going to be a tough football game, and I look forward to a great matchup, and not something that any of us take lightly. I think Temple's a formidable opponent. And I'm glad to get, a team like Temple here.
There you go. UAB favored by about 7.5 in that game again, 2:00, ESPN Plus. So the last home game, Protected. Get down there, UABsports.com, UABsports.com. Get your tickets. Should be an absolutely beautiful day coming up on Saturday. I always love senior days because I love the pageantry and to know what these kids, their blood, sweat, and tears, what they put onto the football field, not only into the football field, but into their collegiate lives academically and athletically. But just talk about what this senior class has done and what they have proven over the last, say, 3 or 4 years at UAB.
Yeah, well, I love and hate Senior Day. I love it for them because it's marks kind of the end of an era for them and the beginning of the next chapter of their life, whether it's going into business or going to play professionally or whatever that might be. But you spend a lot of time with these kids, and I remember a lot of them from when we recruited them, when they visited for the first time with their families, whomever that might have been, when they made their commitment, and now you've been with them for a while. I mean, it's kind of sad too. It's sad to see some of these kids go, and especially the ones you feel like you get to know better. And I always just tell them, I tell their families, thanks for sharing your child with us, and thanks for giving us an opportunity to spend time with your child, because it's meaningful to us. And I don't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly that people are sending what they would consider their most precious possession, if you will, is their child. I mean, you can make more money, I can buy another couch. Your children are what's most precious to you. And for them to entrust us with sort of raising their child from a boy to a young man is meaningful. And so, I look forward to the opportunity, but it's also kind of emotional and sad too that they're moving on. And a great group of guys, and it's a smaller senior class than what we've had in the last several years. When we reinstated football, the NCAA gave us an interesting waiver, which was during if you had played football in 14, 15, or 16, whether you were at UAB or anywhere, if you had played football somewhere, then if you came here before we played again in 17, that time didn't count. Wow. It did not count towards your eligibility. So when we played in 17 and for like the next 5 years, we had a really old roster, and we had in some years was the oldest roster in the country. And that was all because it's hard to recruit a kid that you might say, hey, come here in 15. Now, look, we're not going to play in the fall of 15 or 16, and you're going to lose eligibility. Well, what did you come here for? But particularly guys who had like a nagging injury or whatever, or saw themselves as needing to physically grow, this is a place they could come and do that, start their degree. And we had guys who left us who had been with us 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, wow. 7 years.
Yeah.
They had been with us for a long, long time and left with MBAs. No joke. And good for them. It was great for them, and it allowed us to really recruit, talented players that could contribute. But that's now long gone, and we're back to kind of typical recruiting. But so we have a smaller senior class. So we now have one of the younger teams in the country, and so it's not a huge group, but a great group.
Yeah, UAB Director's Chair. He's the athletic director, of course, of the UAB Blazers, UABsports.com. Get ready for the big ball game this Saturday, 2 o'clock against Temple. Of course, salute to service, and a senior day should just be a wonderful day full of pageantry and hopefully a big win for the UAB Blazers this weekend. I did want to ask you, before we get into some classic rock, and I got a Van Halen story I want to get into with you a little bit, so you're going to get off on this a little bit. But the Lane Kiffin story that just came down, I guess, late last night. Evidently, DeSanto Rollins, one of his scholarship players, evidently is having some mental issues, and basically was not answering phone calls, was not meeting with Coach. Coach repeatedly asked to meet with him, and he just was kind of AWOL. And then eventually met with Lane Kiffin, and he recorded their conversation, unbeknownst to Lane. That went viral yesterday, and of course, in that particular conversation, this is not really the point I want to get into, because I don't know if you've seen the story or not, but there were a lot of F-bombs. There was a lot of coach speak coming from Lane Kiffin. He did understand and was empathetic and compassionate towards whether this kid was having some mental issues. And it sounded like he just needed some time away from the program. He asked for a couple weeks off. What kind of resources, and I think we think about 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they don't have issues. They don't have mental or clinical depression or anything else that maybe older people do. But just talk about, from a UAB standpoint, some of the resources that you have for your players if in fact they are having a difficult time with life.
Yeah, so we're fortunate at UAB that we have an on-campus clinic that has 20 counselors available to us. Some places, some universities that are in smaller towns that don't have a hospital like UAB, they have to go find and employ their own counselors in-house because they don't have the medical resources that we have. So we're fortunate that we don't have them in-house because we don't need them. They're on campus. I mean, they're right here. They're a block from here, but we have counselors for all sorts of needs that young people might have. And that staff has, I think, tripled in my time here. One of the big challenges that we're facing is, and this is not intended to be a derogatory statement at all. It's just I would blame social media for this, though there are many things. There's a difference in coping skills that young people today have versus say 20 years ago and 40 years ago and beyond. So I don't have the mental toughness that my grandmother had. So I'm going to saying that about my own children and children of this sort of college age, say compared to me, but I would say that about myself compared to my my grandparents like yours went through the Great Depression and World War II and Vietnam, and that they've had to cope and deal with that. I didn't have to cope and deal with that. They had their friends go off to war and lay their life down, their close friends and family. And then, my dad was in Vietnam, and they had friends, high school buddies, a lot of them, a lot of people that they knew went to war and did not come back. And so they've had to cope with that. I never had to cope with that. Desert Storm was the only thing close to it. And it's really comparable. It's not comparable. I mean, with 9/11 attack, it's very serious, obviously. But anyway, the people of the young people, my kids' age, haven't had to deal with a lot of that, and they just now what they have is social media that I didn't have to grow up with, which is fortunate for me and unfortunate for them. But it's just the needs are different.
Yeah. Great stuff. He is Mark Ingram, and he just does a fantastic job joining us every week. And something we certainly love to talk about is some classic rock. I don't know if you saw this story. It just broke about 19 hours ago. Sammy Hagar has announced he's going on tour in 2024 with his band, The Circle. Michael Anthony will be part of that band. Joe Satriani, of course, his guitar player, will be part of that lineup. And he has reached out to one Alex Van Halen and to one David Lee Roth. And I'm not going to, because this is a family show, but use the MF word and said, come on, let's go. Come and join us on the road. We'll get after it. We'll go out and he's going to do an entire tour dedicated to Van Halen music. And he's like, listen, he's like, listen, there's stuff that David Lee Roth, there's no way he could sing my stuff because no one can sing Sammy Hagar stuff. He said, but I do think some fans would love to hear some old David Lee Roth type of Van Halen music if he can still hit the notes. First of all, should they go on the road with Sammy Hagar? I know didn't they do a Sam and Dave thing for a while where it was David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar about 10, 12 years ago. I think it was the Sam and Dave show. And I think they did a handful of shows together where they alternated who was the headliner. I don't think it went particularly well because they're not particularly best friends. But I just want to get your thoughts. And to me, it's like this is a bucket list for me. Like I will do whatever it takes to make sure that I see Sammy Hagar. But to see David Lee Roth with them would be kind of fun. Would that be a train wreck? Is that something you'd like to see?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm in. You find out about it if it's close. I'm going. I'd love to see it. It's as you know, we've talked many times on the show. It's my favorite all time band, and I never saw him.
Yeah,
never saw Eddie Van Halen, which is just breaks my heart. But I'd love to see it. Yeah, I think that I've always understood. Again, you're just what you read that David Lee Roth is just so egotistical that he's really hard to manage and deal with.
Yeah.
And I think him and Eddie just clashed constantly, which you assume means that him and Alex also clashed constantly. And I think Michael Anthony was just along for the ride and happy to be a part of the journey,
Great backup singer, by the way.
Not particularly some special bass player. Really good backup vocalist, though. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But not to make light of that. I mean, he really good. But he was just kind of in the mix. But man, I think it'd be awesome. I mean, Joe Satriani is a phenomenal guitar player, and so what a great group. I've seen Sammy Hagar before. He's really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a talented guitarist and singer too. And yeah, like there's stuff that he can do, at least in his prime. I mean, who knows about now, but vocally things that Sammy can do that David never really could do. And but I'd love to see. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I think it'd be great too. I know the BJCC has made an effort and a commitment to start bringing in some great bands, including Drake, that just announced that yesterday that he's going to be coming to town. So maybe Sammy Hagar and the Circle will be.
Is that what it's called? Sammy Hagar and the Circle of Friends?
It's actually called the band's called Circle. But I guess it's Sammy Hagar with Circle or just Circle. But that's, he had Chickenfoot and he's had, a proliferation of different bands that he's put together. But Michael Anthony's always in his band, and then Joe Satriani, which is interesting because I believe David Lee Roth had Stevie Vai in his band, correct?
He did. Yeah.
Two of those guys.
When Dave went solo and did, the Eat 'Em and Smile album and, Skyscraper,
which were both very good, by the way. I enjoyed both those albums.
They're great. Yeah, they're really good.
We're in. Let me get to work on it. Let me see if I can make it happen.
Please do.
All right, I'll see you down there on Saturday at the game. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up next week.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.